All right. Welcome to the Stacey West Fantasy Football Challenge. My name's Gary, and I'm already a little bit hacked off with it all because I am basically the kiss of death to players across the board. Still, we've committed to doing it now, so I suppose we're going to have to. Easier and all.
Hiya.
Yeah.
Good, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, cracking, isn't it? It was actually quite funny, wasn't it? Because during the game, we were both watching Lincoln, and we were also both commenting on what was going on in the fantasy football. And I was genuinely like flicking through, wanting like a Bradford goal, and I thought I'd done well. And do you know what? It was only when at the walk over breakfast on Sunday morning where I said how many points I'd got, all happy with myself because it was more than the week before. And you're like, oh well, I've got this many. Yeah, whatever. So let's get straight
you
in.
had a look, hadn't you? You had a little look at the scores in game when you thought I'd got less than you. But maybe that isn't how it turned out. I'll be honest, I wasn't particularly pleased with my performance this week either. I was pretty concerned during the games. So I suppose it's only right that we have a look at how we got on.
Yes, well, let's first of all, I think that one of the keys here is there's a strategy unfolding, and the picking of the two teams is a massive strategy. Look, here's my picks then. So let me take you through it. So this was me last week. I got Alex Palmer. That was a good pick. He kept a clean sheet. West Brom won 1-0. I had Josh Madger captained. He got an assist. West Brom won. So that's 16 points for me. I thought I'm absolutely flying here. Paulie O'Connor, despite getting sent off, got me 7 points. But then across the middle of the park, I mean, I'm a kiss of death. Billy Bowden, he'd been one of the leading scorers in the division. He got stretchered off after 26 minutes, hence his 1 point. And I'd got him vice captained as well. And it was either him or Alfie May. And I've got, I know which one I'll pick. I'll pick Billy Bowden, Bellend. Dan Crowley. It was a toss up between Crowley and Jody Jones. Crowley obviously played all game but did nothing. I picked Ethan Arahan in a game where the ball was never in the midfield, and somehow he's only scored 1 point despite coming out on a winning side and playing the whole game. So I was watching the text feed of Watford and Sheffield United on Sunday, desperate for Ryan Andrews to do well, and he hit the post. If he had scored, I might have got more than my 36 points. But I got 36 points, which wasn't enough to pull me off the technical bottom. I mean, your bottom still in the overall league, but it wasn't enough, sadly, to beat you.
Yeah, but in all fairness, this was a huge drop from my opening week. I felt like 65 points should be the norm, but only 41 points for me this week. Thankfully, just enough to scrape past you this week. I do think if I continue to get 41 points going forward, that'll be a losing score more often than it's a winning score. It's 24 less than last time. So the big one for me really is I decided to, unsurprisingly, back the stats and the underlying numbers rather than results so far. And despite Luton Town being winless at this point of the season, I thought the underlying numbers suggested that they'd be likely to win, and also that Alfie Doughty was a relatively high-performing player, both in terms of key passes, potential assists, therefore, and also interceptions, which is a big metric for midfielders in terms of point scoring. And Luton lost again, and Alfie Doughty only got 2 points, who I captained. So I feel like, as much as I'm, of course, delighted with the win, I feel like I've got away with it a little bit here.
Can I actually say it's a moral victory for me? And there's a reason for that. Across your team, you've got 25 points. Your other points came from picking Walsall and Notts County. So 25 points. Across my team, 16, so 17, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 points. So actually, when it came to picking the players, I was better than you. And I wonder if maybe that's what we ought to base the score on this week.
Hey, the rules are the rules. The rules are the rules. We'll take it. You know what's interesting? Because I was looking at this earlier, because there's teams that you select at the bottom. Of course, the teams that are most successful over the season, they're going to be up towards the top of the end of the league. They're going to win more games. But you can only pick each team 5 times over the whole season. So I think that's going to come into play later in the season. It's probably going to be picking up your points now, and then you're going to have to be a bit more smart about those teams that you pick towards the end of the season. So I don't want to change the rules. We've got to play the rules that are there. But I have to say, I reckon that will become a little bit more of a variable as the season goes on.
Not for me, because I just won't be able to pick the shit teams at the end of the season. I mean, Bradford, no points, honestly. They were playing Grimsby. I feel let down this week. So far, the scores on the doors after 2 weeks of us doing it. Fantasy Football Challenge, yes, very good. Chris 2. Gary 0. Whatever. So there's a Stacey West League. There's 81 people now, which is up. I think 1 or 2. I know Carl Beach joined in the week, so that's brilliant. If anyone else is doing it, please do join. You can even join retrospectively, because the way me and Chris are scoring, you'll be off the bottom within weeks. There is a top 10 of the Stacey West League. So we've got M Bottomley with My Ben House on 262 points. We've only had 4 weeks.
That's
How
impressive.
the hell has he got 262 points? That's outstanding work. Callum Imp second, Will Mitson's got Mitson's Red Imps third, Keith Hookham with Bear Experience fourth, Ash Franklin is fifth, L Holden up the Imps FC is sixth. Why only 7? What a great question, because if we had to pick any more, they'd get injured, wouldn't they? Because I would pick them from T Prize. Imps FC 8th, Meg Imps 9th, and entering the top 10, Dara Tracy with Pordio Clock. So that is the top 10 in the Stacey West League, and there's a bottom 10. And 4 of the Stacey West team are in the bottom 10. So Stu Wells was a non-mover at 76. Somehow I've dropped. So that's got to be because Carl joined. So technically I have actually dropped 1 place, which is really quite harsh. You're still bottom, but there's only 11 points between 21 points now between us for 2 weeks. Charlie Beeston definitely winning. He's definitely not winning. He's on 143. He falls as well this week. John Harris, he's an MK Dons fan, is above us. We've got Monsma Munch, which I think from Johnny Benton is one of the best team names. I really like Monsma Munch. But I also like Makama Chameleon, and we haven't got that, but that's Ben, and it's worth mentioning that Ben is 36th. So Ben is above you, he's above me, he's above Charlie, he's above Stu Wells. Wow, there we go. Now, it's like I said to Jack Bull Hall, I actually think that the lower you are in the fantasy league, the more it proves that your football knowledge is based on Lincoln City and not everything else. So the lower you are, the more you know about Lincoln. And bear in mind, you're 2 weeks behind. So technically, me and you are fighting for the most knowledgeable Lincoln fan. I don't care. I don't care about Dan
I don't
Crowley.
know how I feel about that.
I don't care about Dan Crowley. So we're on to week 5. Now, it's a really interesting one this week because it's the international break. So that means making sure, as I have got up here, as we're going to go through it, because if I've got a game wrong, I'm going to change it, and I don't care what the rules say. But there are the international breaks, so there's a lot of matches. There's no championship matches. There's only a handful of League One matches. This has forced us to go within ourselves, and we're going to take through our teams now. So what we're going to do is 1 player at a time each, so that it's not just one person talking all the time. And I've designed a little graphic which took me hours and hours.
Look at that.
So, Chris, if you want to start with goalkeeper, and we'll go through our picks this week.
Yes, well, I'm keeping with my tactic of looking at mismatches in quality on the pitch and predicting a result in that regard, and then trying to find players that fit into those fixtures that I've selected. And the Stacey West curse struck once again after my quite probably harsh criticism of Shrewsbury Town on our live podcast on Friday. Someone asked in the comments, are there any teams that you might want to change your position or you've changed your opinion on? And I said Shrewsbury. I picked Shrewsbury last in my 1 to 24s. And I said, I think they're even worse than I thought they were. So, of course, they go and win 3-0 at the weekend against Leyton Orient. But also, Leyton Orient are one of another team in League One that were, before Saturday, pointless. So, I still am going to maintain my lack of faith in Shrewsbury Town. And actually, another team that I think is probably better than I expected them to be has been, regrettably, Wrexham. I think they've been really high performing so far this season, better than I thought they would be, to be honest. And Shrewsbury did win 3-0 at the weekend, but still created very few chances, and particularly only created it in the last few minutes, which the 3-0 kind of fatted them a little bit. It should have been 1-0 and turned into the score, the underlying numbers. So I think Wrexham are a good shout here for a clean sheet. So I've gone for Arthur Okonkwo, Wrexham goalkeeper, as my number one.
Now, I have actually gone for a similar tactic to you with different players. I noticed we've both got 2 Wrexham players in our team, although for some reason I then haven't selected Wrexham at the bottom, but there we go. Probably another mistake. I've got an ex-Imps feel. I can't help it. I genuinely can't. I've gone for Paul Farman against Swindon because there's 2 ex-Imp points here. One, it's Farms. 2, it's playing Swindon. I mean, they are bad at the minute, and they, 6 games without a win. I think they've only done 2 draws in that run. They don't create an awful lot. Their supporters are saying that they don't create an awful lot. I picked Farman. Barrow had a different goalkeeper in last night, but I'm assuming that was squad rotation, because if it wasn't, it will be an absolute farce again.
He did play on a Saturday, you'll be pleased to know.
Yeah, he's actually been getting some quite good point scores, and do you know what? I just thought I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go and have Paul Farman. So that's the one. I noticed you've changed your formation. That's interesting. What's the thinking there?
To be honest, I couldn't see that many goals or guaranteed goals in the fixtures this week. I just saw more point scoring opportunities from teams defending well than I could from like a high scoring game. So alongside your methodology in regards to picking a Barrow player in a defensive position, because you expect Swindon to not offer too much going forward, I've selected Ben Jackson of Barrow to play in a back 3 in my 7-a-side team. Mainly, he is currently Barrow's top scoring in terms of fantasy football point scoring defender so far this season. Scores highly for clearances, but of course potential for assists from his position as well. But ultimately, I've kind of gone for clean sheet points is what I'm hoping for here, by selecting a Barrow defender with the secondary benefit of it's a fullback who may well get an assist or 2. You never know.
So I've picked Robbie McKenzie next. I actually originally had Mickey Demetriou picked there, and at last minute I've swapped it around a little bit because Morecambe have lost so many games this season that they're bound not to going into the weekend. I just thought Gillingham are actually top of the league. They're scoring well, but it's hard to pinpoint an actual star for them. They're just doing really well. Now, McKenzie scored against Chesterfield this weekend. He's unlikely to do that again. He's only scored 7 career goals. So it's a risk because they're playing Doncaster, especially seeing as you vice-captained a Doncaster player. So we are kind of going head-to-head there. But I actually think that if there is something... Here's a thought. It's not always the teams that are doing well that their forwards are going to score. Do you know what I mean? So McKenzie is clearly a good player. He's a good player for Gillingham. Gillingham are doing well. If Doncaster are putting them under a bit of pressure, that's going to mean that the defenders see a little bit more of the ball, have a little bit more to do. But if they're a good side, they're going to do that well. So I've put my faith in Robbie McKenzie.
Well, what's really interesting here is that I put my faith in Mickey Demetriou, who you took out of the team in favour of Robbie McKenzie. Now, Mickey Demetriou plays for Crewe, who have not had a particularly promising start to the season, but Morecambe have had a challenging start to the season and have been quite underwhelming, particularly in chance creation. Mickey Demetriou also has got a couple of points so far this season, more than a couple of points. So he's got plenty of points this season for clearances, scores really well for clearances, and blocks as well. Only kept 1 clean sheet so far for Crewe, but I thought this might be a little bit of an outlier here for someone who could be a high-performing player in, I think it's a kind of local derby. I'm not sure. It might be classed as one. I just think he's going to be busy enough, but I just don't think Morecambe will offer a huge amount. So again, I'm banking on potential clean sheet points here, but also Mickey Demetriou has been known to bag a goal or 2. Of course, he scored a few last season. And he's also their captain. So I imagine he's not likely to get 90 minutes there. So again, gone for defensive numbers here. try to be smartish in terms of the fixture. Mainly a little bit of a lack of faith, similar to Shrewsbury with Morecambe, than it is that Crewe are good. But I think they can defend okay with Mickey Dimitri in their side.
Now, we're both going to talk about the same game here, which we've already spoken about. So I'm not going to say the obvious as to why I've picked another Wrexham, or my first Wrexham pick. I'm going to tell you why. It's Max Cleworth. He's scored twice already this season. Don't for one second think he'll score again. But I just saw an article on News Now earlier where basically Phil Parkinson was saying how good he was. So he's guaranteed a start. He's almost guaranteed a clean sheet, with it being Shrewsbury who they're playing. And if he does get a clean sheet, and I've now vice captained him, at least it will kind of match up with your 2-point clean sheets that you'll get from Wrexham. So it's almost, we don't see each other's teams, but almost it feels like I'll almost claw something back. So if there is a clean sheet for Wrexham, you get it twice, but I get it 1.5 for Cleworth. And if there isn't a clean sheet, you suffer twice and I only suffer the half. So tactically that's worked out really well for me. I'd love to say that it was intentional, but I hope very much so that one or the other. Actually, I don't care, as long as whatever happens, it happens twice as bad to you. So
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so my third defender, because I have gone for a 3-2-1 shape.
Only you could make fantasy football about tactics on a regular basis.
It's not about tactics, it's just player selection. And you get to move around your team. You can play 2 defenders or 3 defenders. I've gone for 3
defenders. You could put a little P on for press, and that person, if he pressed, got extra points.
Oh, yeah. I'd play Ben House every week then up front. But Ewan O'Connell plays central centre-back of Wrexham's back 3. Again, as mentioned, playing against Shrewsbury. So like to think there's a strong chance that Wrexham will be good for a clean sheet here, particularly playing at home. Again, really banking on clean sheet points here rather than goal scoring threat, though, of course, is always a goal scoring threat from set pieces, by Cleworth, scoring a couple so far this season. Also, because he's playing central of the back 3, is likely to have more aerial duels than the outside centre backs, and therefore more likely to see some of the ball compared to the other 2. So I thought in terms of point scoring for clearances and things like that, bearing in mind that Wrexham do play quite direct style with lots of long passes, I thought a lot of those might count as clearances, because I noticed the teams that seemed quite possession-based, their defenders didn't have a huge amount of points for clearances. So I'm guessing a pass out rather than a long clearance doesn't count. So I've taken a little bit of style into consideration here, but mainly just the fact that Wrexham are better than Shrewsbury and they're more likely to keep a clean sheet than most other fixtures in the league this season, this week. So we both had the same mentality there. We just chose a different player, didn't we?
We did. Moving into the midfield for me now, I have gone with another former Lincoln City player. I've gone with Robbie Gotts. Now, I really put a lot of stock in the fact that I thought Ethan Arahan would be able to score points. When we looked into the point scoring system, I thought he is on to a winner here. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And he wasn't. So I'm putting the same in Robbie Gotts this weekend, because they're playing Swindon Town. We know that Mark Kennedy tries to play out from the back a little bit. We know he tries to play through the thirds a little bit. I think Robbie Gotts will see a lot more of the ball than Ethan Arahan did, and Ethan Arahan was only seeing it going over his head. Gotts usually completes 90 minutes for Barrow, perhaps not so much in the League Cup, but he has completed 90 minutes for them in the league in his last 2 appearances. I just think that he's a player that can win me some points. Basically, that's why you pick them, isn't it? You pick players because they win you some points. I haven't really been any more technical than that. I am a little bit disappointed to see he didn't start the first game of the season against Crewe, actually. Okay, that's a problem. But anyway, I fancy Barrow to beat Swindon. I wanted to pick a Barrow midfielder. He's one that I knew. There you go. That's my tactics.
Fair enough. Yeah, we both agree on the Barrow selection, so that makes total sense. Despite me selecting 3 defenders, which might make you think that I've been kind of defence-minded in my point-scoring chances this season, or this week. I keep saying this season. My midfield 2 and forward are all quite attack-focused, to be honest with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Luke Molyneux of Doncaster. Now, this is someone who I have actually vice-captained as well. Now, Luke Molyneux is, I believe, the highest point-scoring midfielder in League Two currently in terms of EFL. 4 goals, 2 assists in 4 games. Absolutely on a hot streak. Of course, all the stats nerds would tell you that that is an unsustainable trend, and at some point you would expect that to end. You would not expect that to happen in the next match. This might seem unwise, but also form is a thing that doesn't always get taken into consideration with statistics. He's clearly on really good form, and when you look at the goals he's scored, they've been really, really high quality goals. They haven't been like lucky kind of flukes or tap-ins. Most of them have been just really well taken strikes. And despite Gillingham, who are their opponents, having a strong start to the season in terms of results, I actually feel that they're probably not quite as good as the current league table suggests. And I think Doncaster are a really strong side this season and offer a lot of attacking threat. So this will be really interesting because it'll almost be an element of Luke Molyneux versus Mr. Mackenzie, who you selected at the back as a Gillingham player. So that'll be an interesting one. But I've selected Luke Molyneux of Doncaster Rovers playing Gillingham at home, which I think is key.
Okay. So my next pick is Aaron Wildegg, and it's a similar reason, to be fair. He scored 2 goals in his last 2 games. Form, etc., is something I took into consideration. Also, they're playing Port Vale, and I think Port Vale are massively overrated. They've gone into a really bad run. I backed them against Barrow the other week in the first week that we did this, and they lost 4-0. So I think that they're a side who are on a downward trajectory. They've also lost 3-2 to Doncaster recently as well. So I think that Newport are a side that can turn them over. I quite like Newport. They've won 3 of their last the 3 league games in a row, beating Doncaster, Accrington, and Morecambe. I was trying to look and think outside. When I say outside the box, and it's easy to go, well, that game looks like a bonus. So we'll have Wrexham players or we'll have Barrow players. But for 1 or 2, I just wanted to kind of think a little bit differently. And so I just thought Wildegg looked like the sort of person I'd pick. Also, I seem to remember when he played for Morecambe, I quite like the look of him. So in he goes, hoping he's kind of the wild card, isn't he? Because you say we've got Gillingham and Donny matched up. We've got the Wrexham element. I can see up top we've got the same captain. So there's not a lot to be had there. You know, the outlier is Crewe versus Morecambe and Demetriou and Aaron Wildegg. And I'm more confident in Wildegg, I think.
Yeah, there's some interest. This is very interesting, isn't it? You know what? I think I learned a lesson because in the first week I went really big on selecting a couple of players from the same team and backing that team in terms of my team selection at the bottom, and it worked in week 1 with 65 points. I think that. But I thought, is that a bit high risk? And then last week, despite of course a narrow victory, as we both mentioned, that 41 points isn't very many, and actually on the team selection, the actual players, you did win. So I felt I've got to go back to that first week's mentality and just back my instinct. And if there's a team I really fancy, back them in terms of selecting players from that team and selecting that team as my kind of team selections at the bottom. So my second midfielder is a Notts County midfielder, someone who was mentioned last week because he was selected by you. I almost selected him, but didn't. I couldn't choose between selecting Danny Crowley of Notts County or Jody Jones, and I went with Jody Jones. Today, I've decided to put Dan Crowley in central midfield. He's got a lot of key passes so far this season, scored a lot of points in that regard. Didn't score many points last weekend, but
Right.
no, I was just saying that was the outlier in this in the season so far. But I think he's got a real opportunity to shine against Accrington. Accrington are not very good at the moment. Yeah, pretty poor. Their recruitment has been primarily from non-league, which I like to see. By the way, as a football fan, I think we all like to see that. In terms of this particular match, I just think the skill gap, the talent level on the pitch of the Notts County side compared to the Accrington side, I just see there's a huge gap there. So I just think Dan Crowley will have the opportunity to really shine in this game. Again, they're at home to Accrington, which I think is a big factor. So I just hope and expect him to see a lot of the ball, create quite a lot of chances against a relatively porous defence. So I've gone with Dan Crowley in the midfield.
Very good. So my final striker is Jack Marriott. Now it's interesting because you said about backing the same teams and the same players. So last week, if I remember correctly, let me just bring it up. I actually backed. That's my 5. This is great television. So I actually had Birmingham as one of my teams and didn't pick a single one of their players, and Bradford as one of my teams and didn't pick a single one of their players either. So I have gone back this week. I backed Wrexham and I haven't picked them as one of my teams. But I think there's goals to be had for Jack Marriott. I think he's a good striker. I think he's found a bit of a home at Wrexham. I think there'll be chances, and if there are chances, the likelihood is he's going to get on the end of them. It's a little bit of a risk. If I'd known what you'd picked, I would have captained Jody Jones. So it's kind of like hindsight has almost come into play a little bit there for me. But I went 2 up top. I went Jack Marriott. Wrexham were one of the teams playing in League One. He's a decent striker. So yeah, I'm back in Wrexham, not at the bottom like you are, but there we go. I mean, we've both backed Jody Jones, so there isn't really any reason to talk about that, is there? Because we've both captained him as well.
Yeah. So last week my decision was torn between do I pick Jody Jones or Dan Crowley. So this week I just picked them both. To be honest, because I back Notts County in this game. They're 2 players that are just in pure talent level of just far too good for the league and well above Accrington, in my opinion. And Jody Jones obviously has performed well so far this season. So I thought a captain there would be a sensible selection. And it sounds like you agreed.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, looking at that as well, because if Wrexham do well, then you get probably the same amount of points as me, because let's say Jack Marriott scores and they keep a clean sheet, but I've got Cleworth vice captain, but you'll get the points at the bottom, but I'll get Marriott's points. Notts County do well, literally you'll get the extra Danny Crowley points. If Barrow do well, I'll get the extra Robbie Gotts points and the points at the bottom. The big game really there, I need Barrow to absolutely tonk Swindon, because you've kind of gone in on them a little bit with 1, but I've got 2 plus the thing at the bottom. So if Barrow do well, I think I could be onto a winner. Having seen the 2 teams and how we've lined up against each other, are you confident of a third week?
Nope, not
you
at
see,
all.
I'm not now, because I'm looking at Robbie Gotts thinking he's been taken. Aaron Walding's been taken off in the 89th minute of his last 2 games. I'm not sure how that affects my points. I didn't look into this particularly deep. So
anyway, I didn't look into it as deep as I did last time. Because I didn't perform as well last week when I put far too much time and effort into it. And the 2 players that I thought were nailed on to score big points in Doughty and Lath didn't. So I was like, right, let's do this just with not gut, but just less stats and more. Now was the thought. I know who would have thought. I'm regretting selecting Mickey Demetriou. I think I could, that's the one that stands out to me. I'm like my selection of Luke Molyneux, and if that's quite a key game for us, isn't it? Because you've chosen a Gillingham player and I've chosen a Doncaster player, so that could be a big key game. But Mickey Demetriou, yeah, maybe I could have selected someone else there. I don't know now. I'm regretting that slightly. Come on, Mickey, don't let me down.
Isn't it mad that we're going to be at the Punk Festival and we are literally going to be keeping an eye on Barrow, Swindon, Wrexham, Shrewsbury, Crewe, Morecambe, and Doncaster and Gillingham? I love the Fantasy League. I really do, even though I'm 2-0 down, because as you say, last week was a moral victory. We should have a moral victory counter. That's 1-0 to me, isn't it? Moral victories. So there we go. Right. So that was your Stacey West EFL Fantasy League show. We're actually amazed that 150 odd people watched it last week, and there's only 80 of you in the league. So thank you so much for that. If you do like it and you are a fantasy football fan, but you're not even a Lincoln City fan, but you just want to talk fantasy football, get involved in the chat here. And maybe we could get a guest on. We're happy to talk through somebody else's team, so it's not just us 2 rambling on every week. But for now, we don't do the up the imps thing on this one, do we? Yeah, we do. So for now, all that's left to be said is up with Call and I.
Substandard Liège.